Hey, what's up, fellow champions? It's Dr. Freeze here. I'm coming to you from my house here in Hayesville. I assume a lot of you guys are at home too. I've got a couple helpers with me today. I've got Penelope Ray. She's our little puggy that's only about, a year and a half old. And this here guy that's loving on her is Mr. Winston. And he's over 13 years old, which is pretty old actually for a dog. In fact, they say that a dog's age is 7 years for every human year. So if he's 13, my math question of the day is, how old is he really in dog years? If he's 13 in human, how old is he in dog years? I want you to respond on Google Classroom with that answer. Now, I brought this home with me today because I think that we need to finish reading the story, of course, right? We're not going to start the story and not finish it. So, chapter 27. Oh, before I begin, let's review a little bit for those that maybe forgot a few things. We've got a boy here. What's his name, Georgie? What's our boy's name?
Peter.
Thank you, Peter. There's him and his family, if you want to zoom in on that. That's Peter and Peter's family. And, he's got a grandpa there with him. And Peter, when he was younger, he spent a lot of time with his grandpa. They had a really close relationship. But his grandpa had to move to Florida. And he didn't really get to see him very much, only like at Christmas, and he kind of lost touch with him. But several years later, when Peter was like 10 or 11, Peter's grandmother got sick and died. And his grandfather, who was living thousands of miles away in Florida at the time, had to come live with Peter and his family because he needed his family to help take care of him. And that happens a lot. It used to happen more frequently than it does now, but a lot of grandparents go back and live with their son or daughter and grandchildren when they get older, especially when one of their spouses pass away, whether the husband or the wife passes away. But anyway, to make a long story short, Peter has to give up his room to his grandpa. And it's not fair to Peter. It's just not fair. He's been in that room his whole entire life. Grandpa thinks he can just come here from Florida one day and move right into his room. It's not fair. Well, Peter has no choice. His parents tell him, Peter, you're giving up the room. Grandpa, he can't be climbing up and down the stairs every time he has to go to the bathroom. And he can't do it. So he's going to have your room, Peter. Meanwhile, Peter, of course, has to move up in the upstairs loft area, which is kind of like a dungeon, he thinks. It's like smelly and he hates it there. And Peter's friends, they tell him, Peter, you got to get back at your grandpa. You can't let him do this. And that's when the war started, right? You remember this, right? And there's been several tricks played on Grandpa, and Grandpa has come right back and played some tricks on Peter himself. It's been back and forth. We've had some good ones. And the last one we just had, Grandpa had taken away. Georgie's telling me to hurry up. I'm hurrying. The last one we had, Peter had taken away. Grandpa had taken away Peter's Monopoly pieces. So when him and his buddies tried to play, there were no pieces there. It was a good one. All right, chapter 27, Go Fish. I was thinking pretty hard about how I was going to get back at Grandpa. It wasn't easy. There were a lot of things I could do and a lot I'd never do. Like burning his underwear, for instance. Remember that? The friend suggested that? No, he's not going to. I didn't want to do something I'd be sorry for later. I thought about and then actually tried to steal his toolbox and hide it. But I found the thing was just so big and heavy. And just thinking about carrying it up 3 flights of stairs from the basement to hide it in the attic was enough to make me tired. Then I figured out what to do. But before I had a chance to do it, I spent a day with Grandpa.
that I want to tell you about. Remember, even throughout this war that's been going on with Peter and Grandpa, sometimes they still tell each other they love them. It's like, I'll get back at you, but you know I love you. And I remember one time Peter's friends, and you remember this too, they tried to say bad things about Grandpa. And Peter said, no, don't say that about my grandpa. He's a good guy. So even though they're having this war, they still love each other. On Friday night, Grandpa asked me if I'd ever gone fishing. And I told him no, I hadn't. Dad was not a fisherman. And the only time I ever saw a live fish was in the big tank at the fish store. Unless you count the lobster I saw once in a restaurant, but he was cooked. Or the goldfish I had once, about a week until he died. Well, Grandpa said, I'm thinking about going out tomorrow morning to catch us a mess of flounder. And I'd sure appreciate it if you'd keep me company, Petey boy. And I think you'd like it too. I wasn't sure if I'd like it. You don't want to go out in the ocean, do you? I asked. No, just a couple 100 yards from the shore, Cold Spring Harbor. Where's that? Oh, a short ride away, maybe 30 miles or so. We wouldn't run into anything big and dangerous, would we? Would we? Like what? Grandpa asked. What do you think Petey's doing? I think he's starting to maybe suspect that Grandpa's up to something. Grandpa laughed. Well, now, he said, what do you think we'd run into? I don't know. Jaws? Grandpa laughed. Well, come on, I never thought of that. I don't think we'd meet up with Jaws, Petey. Leastways, I never have in all the times I've fished out there. Okay then, I said, feeling relieved. Grandpa told me we'd be going up very early the next day. And when he told me to set my alarm for 4:30 a.m., I couldn't believe it. That's the middle of the night, I said. I remember my dad used to, whenever we'd go fishing, he would want to go very early. Because that's when you catch the fish. Everybody knows that. You gotta get up plenty early to outsmart a flounder, he said. Did you ever get up and out of bed at 4:30 in the morning? It's pitch black outside then. I washed and dressed and put on all my clothing that Grandpa said that I need. Old jeans, t-shirt, and a flannel shirt. And an old sweater over that. And my hooded sweatshirt jacket to go on top. A lot of layers here. Grandpa was down in the kitchen working on a bunch of sandwiches to take along. Ham and bologna, he said. That okay with you? Fine, I said. No mustard on mine. Okay, he said. You should never take tuna or any other fish sandwiches when you go fishing, Petey. Scares the fish away. Makes sense. How could that be? I asked. Don't know, but I believe it, Grandpa said. He put the bag of sandwiches in a vinyl zipper bag along with a thermos of cold milk for me. He had another big old thermos he said we'd fill with hot coffee on the way. If you're hungry, Grandpa told me, take some bread and crackers, because we're going to be eating breakfast for an hour or so. I told him I wasn't hungry. What I was sleepy. Remember, 4 a.m.? We stepped out onto the front porch into the black morning. I peeked into a milk box near the door. The milkman wasn't even there yet as we were leaving. Why do you have to go fishing so early? I said. Won't the fish be there in the afternoon too? Tides, Grandpa said as he went to Mom's car. Before I got into the front seat, I squinted up into the black sky. The stars looked like asterisks. Grandpa drove slowly and carefully through city streets, then turned onto the interstate highway. High tides. Grandpa explained to me that they are the most
They are when most of the fish like to feed. The water comes into the harbor and it brings a lot of things that fish like to eat. So if you drop your hook on an incoming tide, well, you just see Mr. Fish just thinks, here's a tasty nibble, and he takes your bait every time. That's why we got to be out in the water at exactly 7 o'clock today, because that's when high tide comes in. He looked over at me in the dark. Do you know what a tide is, don't you? Yeah, it's when the water gets higher and lower, I said. But what makes it do that? The moon, Grandpa said. I thought he was making another joke. How about the stars, I said, or mountains or the trees, maybe? Grandpa chuckled. Nope, just the moon. And on the full moon, you get your highest tides of the month. It's called gravitational pull, Pete, and it's true. You can look it up sometime. Maybe that's something you guys could research. Gravitational pull and how the tides of the ocean are related to the moon. People keep charts of tides and they can tell you when each tide will come for years and years ahead. The tide is very important. Must be, I said. It pulled me right out of bed at 4 a.m., didn't it? We stopped at dinner at a diner a little while, and we ate breakfast. It was only about 5 o'clock in the morning, the earliest I ever had breakfast in my life. Grandpa had the waitress fill his thermos with coffee, and we hit the road again. Grandpa was humming along with a song on the radio, and he seemed very happy. Ahead of the sky was beginning to lighten as dawn came up. Ain't it great? Grandpa grinned at me. Just two gents out on the road, footloose and fancy-free. Don't you love it, Petey? It did feel good being out and alone with Grandpa. We got to Cold Spring Harbor just as the sun was peeping all red and gold at the edge of the sky. Grandpa drove down to the water and parked near Bill's Boat and Bait Shop. I have to tell something true right here. Inside that place, it smelled so awful. There ought to be a law against it. It smelled like rotten fish that had been left there for about a year. That smell could gross out my entire class. Maybe my whole school. We got 2 little pails of bait and walked down the dock on the other side to where the rowboats were tied up. Grandpa helped me into my life vest and put one on himself. Then we put all our stuff into the boat. It had a wide, flat bottom, and Grandpa tucked our fishing rods and tackle under the front seat, and then he helped me get in. Safety first, he told me. No standing up. Sit in one place on the seat and tell me beforehand if you want to go moving around. Aye, aye, sir, I said, and it made him grin. Grandpa untied us from the dock, put the oars into place, and rowed us out into the harbor. It was neat traveling across the smooth water in a small boat, the sunlight dancing on the water, and the cool breeze in my face. I love it, I said to Grandpa. I love it. And he smiled. There's a whole lot more to tell you about that day, but this chapter is much too long already. I could tell you about Grandpa teaching me to bait a hook with a worm or a piece of dead clam. He said it was gross. About how you drop your hook until you feel the bottom and then take up just enough slack of your line. Or that fantastic feeling when a flounder takes the bait and starts to wiggle and jump around. And how you have to pull him in careful and slow and get him up into the boat. Almost everything about that day was wonderful. We caught a whole lot of fish, more than 20. I got so hungry, I ate my first sandwich before 9 o'clock. I learned how to row a boat. It was hard to do,
but I rowed us partway back to the dock. I learned how to clean a fish and get the scales off. It was an adventure. Exciting, thrilling, and just a little bit of danger behind it. And I loved every minute of it. There's nothing like fishing with your grandpa. I know from experience. We're gonna do this again, I told Grandpa on the way home. You bet we are. And we've gone fishing together a lot, many times since that day. Once, we even took Jenny along, and she liked it too. But nothing will ever make me forget that first time fishing alone with Grandpa. So you can see why I felt a little sad later that night when I sneaked into his old room, stole Grandpa's wristwatch. Chapter 28 will be tomorrow. You guys keep working hard. You know I care about you. I know this is a tough time with the COVID-19 virus, but we're going to keep learning and we're going to keep having fun.
I just realized something.
We'll see ya.